welcome to the Smart Publishing Impact Series. I'm Renée Lautermilch, Chief Editor at Smart Publishing, and this is the podcast where we explore all things writing, publishing, and the impact of storytelling. In each episode, I'll share insights and strategies to help you navigate the book journey, whether you're writing, publishing, or already an author. Plus, you'll hear from inspiring authors who are using their book to change lives. And if you're passionate about storytelling and ready to make an impact, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Now let's get started. Hello, and welcome back to the Smart Publishing Impact Series. I'm Renée Lautermilch, Chief Editor for Smart Publishing, and today's episode is a solo episode. It is an episode about one of the most frequent things that myself and Jonathan both get asked, royalties. And to give you a little bit of a teaser as far as where this episode is going, I've titled it, The Riches Ain't in the Royalties. So let's get started. Like I said, one of the most common things that I get asked is all about royalties, how much royalties I'm going to make. And I think that's because a lot of people come to book writing thinking that they're going to make some really good money out of royalties. And I'm going to go ahead and break it to you. There's not a ton of money to be made in royalties unless you end up as a top 1 to 5% author. So immediately in this episode, I've probably bursted a lot of bubbles out there, but stay with me because I'm going to talk about how you can make money from your book versus off your book. Immediately, a lot of people say, well, if I'm not going to be making a bunch of royalties, why should I even write a book? And really, you're thinking about it the wrong way. If you're coming to this thinking about, I want to write a book because I want to make money off of royalties, you are thinking about it the wrong way. Books, again, unless you're one of the top 1 to 5% authors, are about positioning and business strategy. And for others, they're simply about enjoyment, putting legacy out into the world. So the first thing you need to do is you need to clarify your goal for writing your book. That's why my book, The 1 Hour Author, starts with the very end point in mind and works its way backwards in chapter 1, solidifying your concept, where the first thing we get into is, why are you writing a book? What is your goal? What do you want the end result to be? Do you want more speaking gigs? Do you want to position yourself as an authority in your industry? Do you want to create a funnel of sorts for a different product or service that you have in your business? And that's where, hopefully, as you're staying with me and what I'm saying, you're starting to see that's where the money is to be made. So let me just throw out a few facts there for you that I have up here on my screen. Some of these I share in my book, others I don't. But I want to start with traditional publishers when I start talking about royalties, because traditional publishers, the difference between traditional independent publishing is traditional publishing basically takes a writer's manuscript into their ownership, and they then put a ton of marketing backing behind it compared to other, publishing standards, and get pretty wide distribution out there. And so if any author is going to just be making boo-hoos of royalties, it's typically an author that has really solid financial backing in the form of marketing for their book, right? So that's why I'm starting with this statistic, that on average, a new author signed by a traditional publisher, they might sell around 2,000 to 5,000 copies of their book, okay? And again, that is with the backing of a traditional publisher in terms of marketing spend. Traditional publishers, they're competent in a couple things. One of those is, of course, all the logistics surrounding publishing and distributing books. Another is marketing books. Then advances, which is what a traditional publisher usually gives to an author when they sign them and they bring their manuscript on board. Those typically range between $5,000 to $10,000 with royalty rates of anywhere between 5 to 15% on print books and usually around 25% on ebooks. But of course, a lot of these things are being sold in traditional bookstores. Yeah, they're being sold online too. Even as I start to look over time at what our authors sell more of, launch date, we sell a lot of ebooks. But beyond launch date, we sell a lot more paperback. Paperback is still one of the most common formats for readers to buy. They still prefer to get it in their hands. So let's do some math on this. So let's say that the book is $15 retail, which when you look at traditional publishing, they typically mark their books a little bit higher. We'll say that there's about a $5 print and shipping cost on that we have to deduct out. So now we're left with $10, right? Multiply that times, remember we said 2 to 5,000 copies. Let's choose the top end of that, 5,000. $10 times 5,000, and then put a 10% in the middle of that 5 to 15% royalty. Put a 10% royalty on it. Drum roll. Were you good at math? I was not good at math in school. I got good at math later on. That's $5,000, ladies and gentlemen. And that's from an average new traditionally published author, okay? And like I said, it's estimated that only about the top 1 to 5% of all authors make a full-time living solely from their book sales. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. Like I said earlier, most people just think about things the wrong way when it comes to writing a book. The goal is not to make money off of your book. It's to make money from your book. So let's get back to what I mean by that. You're either positioning, you're working on a direct business strategy where you are pushing to things like a course, a paid group, or consulting. So that is where you want to look for making money off of your book. So positioning, what do I mean by positioning? Positioning is typically for those who want to get more speaking gigs, or it could even be more consulting as well. You're basically positioning yourself as an expert in whatever it is that your book is about in order to get your foot in the door, especially if you're looking to get on TV or get, keynote speaking gigs, things like that. The bottom entry to entrance, or the bottom price to entrance, is having a book. And so if you don't have a book, you're not getting your foot in the door. And so that is an investment that you are making towards your larger goal, which is keynote speaking, consulting, whatever it may be. So positioning, really, really, really big reason to write a book. And then you can go into direct strategy, right? So there's an example that I like to use a lot because there's some really hard numbers on it, and it's been a while since this book has come out. I've discussed it before, but Pat Flynn, who was really at the precipice of the whole passive income thing boom that happened like in, around circa 2015, where everybody was going to create this little side hustle that earned them passive income. Well, he actually did it, and he was actually really successful from it. And then he turned around what he was doing and taught it to others and got really successful from that. And he wrote a book that was a part of his business strategy called Will It Fly? And his goal with Will It Fly was not to make boohoos of royalties off of this book. I'm sure he made a few $1,000s in royalties. It helped with some grocery bills there. Great. What he made, not off the book, but from the book, was around $130,000. How did he do that? Well, you can only teach so much in a book format, right? And so if people wanted to learn the more tangible aspects, things that were visual, they had to buy his course. And the book pushed people to enroll in his course. I want to say his course was around $250. And so he was able to convert a pretty good rate of his readers to then go and buy the course. And that ended up making him around $130,000. So that is an example of a book that has been utilized for a specific business strategy. So I'm going to keep this episode short because that's, really all there is to it. That's what I want you to know, is that the riches ain't in the royalties. It's about the positioning, or it's about the business strategy. Maybe I'll leave those of you who write fiction, which, as a publisher, the majority of what we're publishing is nonfiction. We got a little bit fiction here and there. So for those of you who are like, oh gosh, well, I'm just not going to make anything as a fiction writer. I'm not saying you can't become that top 1 to 5%. You certainly can. Your writing has to be really good and really addictive, and you have to invest it in creating a series. So if we're looking at the strategy for fiction writers to make more money, it's creating a series. Let's say maybe it's a 5-book series. You got to hook people with that first book, okay? Typically that first book is sold for a low barrier price. Maybe it's something like $2.99, Kindle version or what have you. And then the rest of the books in the series are, sometimes authors keep them the same pricing. Other times the real strategy is to have them be regular price. So now you hooked somebody. They need every single book in that series. Think about any of you guys who have ever read, the Harry Potter series or anything that just got you hooked and you had to know the rest. Well, they're going to go ahead and buy that whole series. And now what would have been just one book purchase with one royalty associated becomes a 5-book purchase with 5 different royalty amounts associated with it from just one reader. And so that's how you amplify your royalties. And an interesting statistic actually just came out that shows that authors who have written 10 books make 5 times as much in their royalties as those who have written between 2 to 4 books. So the power is in the volume of books written in that sense. And we've actually seen it ourselves in the back end where, when we have books that are linked through a series, somebody buys one, they see the others linked through the series and they just go ahead and buy the others. And now all of a sudden what was one sale has just turned into 3. Okay. Now, I promise, episode's going to be really, really short. I'm looking at the time clock here and it's under 13 minutes. So more bang for your buck that way. Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Smart Publishing Impact Series. Again, my name's Renée Lautermilch. I'm the Chief Editor for Smart Publishing. And if you liked this episode, please go and do me a favor, rate, review, and subscribe so that you can get more. So until next time, keep writing your story.